Good afternoon, City Changers. It's great to be with you. I hope you're praying for the United Kingdom today. Anybody praying? Well, if you weren't, please can you? We have a general election today, and anything can happen in politics. So we need your prayers. Just to reassure you, I did do a postal vote before jumping on the flight last night to South Africa. It is really great to be here in South Africa. It is my favorite place in all the world. And I just love being here. It's a privilege to have got to know Patrick here last year. It's great to get to know you, Jean. It's been great to get to know Alan Platt, the founder of Doxa Deo and City Changers, and just get involved in a whole raft of really exciting relationships. This afternoon, I wanted to just tell you a little bit of my story, if you will allow me. Is that okay? A few years ago, I reached a point in my faith where, well, let me put it like this. Have you ever eaten too much Sunday dinner? Have you ever eaten too much barbecue or a braai? That's what we call them here, isn't it? Have you ever kind of thought, oh, I fancy a movie night. I'm going to go to the supermarket, get myself a little bar of chocolate. You get to the supermarket and you look at the array of chocolates. And have you ever noticed the really small bars are always on the bottom shelf? You know, risk damaging your back, but the really big super value bars are right there in front of you. Ever noticed that? No, liars. There's some people nodding here. There's some people nodding. And you think, oh, I'll buy the really great value bar because I'll get home and this will last me 3 or 4 movie nights. Yeah? Yeah? No. You get halfway through the movie, you look down and there's one strip of chocolate left. Has that ever happened to you and you think, if you eat another chunk, the unthinkable's going to happen? I actually reached that point in my Christian faith. I had read so many Christian books, been to so many Christian conferences, listened to so many sermons. My faith, all about Jesus and me, had become so self-centered, so self-focused, so self-indulgent. And in that moment, I felt God challenge me and say, Matt, deprivatize your faith. Take that which you have reduced to me and you and getting as many people into heaven when you die as possible, and make it about me and you and the whole community and culture and society in which you live. Take your faith and put it out there in the marketplace. Put it out there in society. And that which does not survive was mere religion and you were better off without it in the first place. And that which survives is the real thing. I didn't know where to start. I thought, what a challenge. So the first thing I did was I joined a political party. Thank you. That's where you get things done, isn't it? Let's not go there. So I joined a political party, and it's a bit like when you join the gym come the 1st of January. You know, you get the membership, and then you're active for a few weeks and nothing happens. And you stop going. You can join a church. I know Doxa Deo doesn't have members, you have partners. But you can join a church, can't you? And you can sit there as a passive recipient and not get involved. Well, I did the same thing with my political membership. I nearly said the name of the party then. I had my membership card in my wallet, but for 6 months I did nothing with it. And then I said to my wife one Saturday morning, sweetie, I'm thinking of going to volunteer for the local political group. I live in Wimbledon in southwest London. Wimbledon's famous for 1 or 2 things like the tennis and the Wombles. Everybody heard of the tennis? Anybody heard of the Wombles? Yeah, great. Okay, so off I went. And I arrived at the local political group's office, and they were preparing leaflets to give out and go on knocking on doors and engage in the community. And I was helping prepare all the materials. And I'd been there 10 minutes, and they said, Matt, would you mind coming into a side room? Now, occasionally I'm known for saying the wrong thing in the wrong moment. And I thought, oh no, I've put my foot in it already. What have I said? So I followed them into a side room. And they explained, Matt, we've got a local election coming up. And we're preparing our candidates for the London Borough of Merton. And in one of the wards, it's an unwinnable seat, we are a candidate short. And what we're looking for is a paper candidate. Because if the ballot papers go out and we don't have a full quota of candidates, it looks really bad. It looks like we're disinterested and we can't even get together a person to represent us. They said, so it's an absolutely unwinnable seat, we assure you, and we're just looking for somebody to agree for their name to be put on the ballot paper. I thought, what could be easier than that? So I agreed. 2 months of knocking on doors and engaging with the community later. I remember I was playing a game of squash with a friend, and I said, hey, Chris, I said, I've been in a local election today. Do you fancy a laugh? He said, yeah, I do. I said, should we go to the town hall to see the count? That's what they call it. I don't know what you call it here. But we went off to see the count, so we went down to the town hall, and there they were, counting the papers. Still quite old-fashioned. The papers kind of pile up side by side. And I thought, this is going to be a hoot. And it got to about 12 o'clock, and they were still counting. Got to 1 o'clock, and they were still counting. Got to 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was beginning to think, I just want to go home to bed. And they'd finished counting. And the chief executive of the local authority took to the podium, took the microphone, and began to announce the results. It got to my ward in the centre of Wimbledon. And I won! This unwinnable seat. Never believe anybody that says you're a paper candidate. Well, I'll tell you what, I was shocked. I was stunned. But you've never seen such a stunned look as the leader of my political party, who suddenly thought we better get to know this guy, who walked into our office on one occasion, and after 10 minutes we asked him to stand. And so I've continued this journey of trying to deprivatize my faith. To take that which is so tempting to reduce to you and Jesus and going to church on a Sunday and being loyal and faithful and doing all the right things. But actually, if it's privatized, it makes absolutely no difference in the world around us. Because a privatized faith is impotent to change society. A privatized faith is impotent to change community. A privatized faith is impotent to change the culture. Why is it that in so many communities there are such high percentages of Christians, of people who go to church every week? Why is it that some of those communities have some of the highest levels of corruption, or the highest levels of gun crime, or the highest levels of domestic violence? Why is it? Because it's a privatized faith. It's not a faith that actually is about the whole of life. And so when I was invited to say a few words at this event, I was so excited, because this is about people who love Jesus and know his call to the marketplace. You are intentionally and deliberately choosing to deprivatize your faith. And faith expressed in the marketplace is not about trying to get people to church on Sunday. It isn't about just being a bigger giver than some of the other people in your church. No. Being a lover of Jesus in the marketplace is about creating the ability to transform the economics, the politics, the culture, the fabric of our society and our communities. This is the game that we're in. This is the mission of City Changers. To deprivatize our faith and to outwork what it means to love Jesus out there, not in the world of black and white, but in the world of the grey, where it's sometimes really difficult to know what decisions you make. When you make decisions in church, okay, there's some politics, but, we know it, the Bible tells us what we should do. But actually trying to interpret the Bible in the marketplace, where actually sometimes you're left to choose between two things, neither of which seem ideal. It's more difficult. It's life in the grey. It's not life in the black and white. I've continued to live with this challenge of deprivatizing faith. I started a business called Relationology. I was once invited to speak at a business conference on networking, and I said, thank you, but no thank you. I hate networking. Networking has no integrity to it. It is manipulative, contrived. I said, but I do believe that relationships are powerful in growing business. The organizer immediately said, Matt, can you speak on that subject? I was cornered. I had to agree. And I thought, I don't want to become known as the anti-networking guy, because it's always bad to be defined by what you're not, isn't it? Sometimes the church needs to remember that. It's bad to be defined by what we're not. What are we for? So I thought relationships are a science. We can all learn to do them better. They're an art form. They take a lifetime to master. I thought the science and the art and the study of relationships, I thought relationology. I ran to my computer, Googled it, couldn't find it. So I formed the company, trademarked the name, bought the web domain. And now I work in the financial services sector. I work with very clever people, helping them not only be technically smart, but to be smart in their relationships, to be smart with their clients, to drive revenue growth, but through building authentic, high-trust, long-term relationships. Because ultimately, people buy people. So trust and relationships are the true currency of business. It's not money at all. People buy trust. And so that's my little business, relationology. But Cinnamon Network, somebody kindly mentioned, this is, again, about me trying to help churches deprivatize their faith. And in the UK, we sat down 6-7 years ago and we said, what could we do to help churches demonstrate faith in action in the community? And what smart business thinking can we apply to the way that the church does that? And we found a number of brilliant church-based community projects addressing antisocial behavior or food poverty or debt or homelessness. And we said, wow, these projects are amazing. And other churches are beginning to look at these projects and they're beginning to replicate them. And we thought, rather than come up with a great idea and ask God to bless it, why don't we join in with what we see God doing? And that's where Cinnamon Network began. We looked at those projects that weren't ours, but we said, let's form a partnership. Let's form a network. And let's see if we can encourage lots of churches to start these projects. Let's, in essence, franchise the best of what the church is doing in the community. It makes no sense at all. If one church is working really well with people out of work, another church is working really well with the homeless, if another church is working really well into schools and addressing educational inequalities, why should another church have to reinvent the wheel? We are sometimes so dumb and stupid. So we said, let's franchise these models of best practice. Let's put them together in such a way as they can be given to lots of different churches to save them the blood and the sweat and the tears of having to start again. And so we took commercial franchising and we applied it to these church-based community projects. And we started to run a 2-year incubation program to help a project move from one church to being run across multiple churches. And as Anton kindly said, now there are 30 models that we have in the UK, and they've been replicated by 3,500 churches. We're trying to create mass mobilization of the church. We're trying to put the church to work in community, not to have a privatized faith that is comfortable and clean and black and white and easy, but to mobilize a faith that rolls up its sleeves, that demonstrates faith in action in the community and uses the best of business thinking to help and drive that mobilization. It's been an exciting journey. And we're delighted now to be exploring working in other countries. And one of those is in the Netherlands. We're actually looking with Alan at working in South Florida. And we are beginning to work here in South Africa. And we think, wow, what if we could help find the best of what churches in South Africa are doing in their communities to address issues of injustice and poverty around education and employment and many other issues. And what if we could find those projects and we could franchise those so that churches, whatever their denomination or network or tribe, could actually take somebody else's best practice and start it in their church. And that's the journey we're on now in South Africa. But I think there is a massive challenge to the church, where in many parts of the world, it is losing its credibility. One of the places I work is in the Republic of Ireland. And the credibility of the church in the Republic of Ireland has fallen off the cliff because of instances of child sex abuse, of graves, and many other issues. It will never be arguments about Scripture that will persuade the Irish society to believe in God. We will never win an apologetic argument through throwing Scripture at people who don't believe in it. The most powerful apologetic for the God that we believe in is our faith in action in the community. And in so many parts of the world where I look, actually the church is on the edge. And some people think it's on the edge of disaster. I don't see that. I see the church on the edge of massive opportunity. We're actually, if you looked, you can tell a lot by an organization by their accounts, can't you? You know, and for many churches, you look at their accounts and you see that actually most of what they spend is investing into their Sunday showpiece. But what if we could turn those budgets around, actually, and simplify what we do on Sundays, and allow our budgets and our accounts to show actually that what the church does is invest more in its community, to demonstrate faith in action, to be the ultimate Christian apologetic, because no one can argue with the love of God. Just a couple of years ago, when the European refugee crisis reached its peak, and we saw the picture of that young boy lying flat on the beach in Turkey. Do you remember seeing the picture? I spoke to my colleague and I said, Mark, what's the best example of what you've seen the church do to welcome and resettle refugees? He told me about a church in the Midlands who had built a relationship with the local authority. And every time a refugee family are rehoused in their community, the local authority refer them to the church. And the church send 2 trained volunteers to go and visit that family in their home. They introduce themselves and say, welcome to our community. Can you imagine, as a refugee in a new place, to have 2 people turn up on your doorstep full of love, who say welcome, who offer help to help them resettle in that community. That church had been working in that way for 5 years. I literally picked up the phone there and then and I said, Karina, would you be willing to give away all that you've learnt about welcoming and resettling refugees to your church and give it to any other church that's interested in running it? And in the first 12 months, they helped 45 other churches start that same program to welcome and resettle refugees. Isn't that just incredible? Just a very simple model. Just this last weekend, one of the national newspapers in the UK called The Times wrote a story about the project we're incubating this year. It's called Care Home Friends. There are 50,000 branches of the church in the UK, and there are 17,000 residential care homes. If an elderly person resides in a residential care home, they are twice as likely to feel lonely and isolated as they are if they live in the community. I thought it would be the other way around. They're twice as likely to feel lonely in a care home as they are in the community. 80% of people who live in our care homes wrestle with long-term memory loss and dementia. 80%. The thing they need most is just the offer of unconditional love and friendship. Because the average amount of time they receive each day, outside of the physical help and support they need, social time, the average amount of social time they receive is just 2 minutes. And so Care Home Friends encourages churches to adopt a care home, train befrienders to go into the care home and reach out to these people. What if 1 in 3 churches adopted a care home in the UK? 1 in 3. Every one of the 17,000 care homes would be adopted by a church, and volunteers would be going in each week to offer friendship and love, faith in action. Wouldn't that be incredible? And that's what we're working towards. So this is Cinnamon Network. The other thing we've done briefly, because I can see the clock, is the church is led by professional storytellers. I'm a professional storyteller. But if we want to engage in civic society, we need to learn a different language. It's the language of numbers. They may like our little anecdotes, but we need to speak to them in numbers. That's the way they work. So we've created a means of helping churches in a town or a city or a community work collaboratively to measure the social impact and economic value of that social impact within their community. And when they get the report, the local authority are blown away. We never knew you were doing that much. And the church is thinking, we didn't know we were doing that much either. But it leads to new confidence, both in the church and in civic society. It leads to new conversations and new levels of collaboration. We have now helped 87 towns and cities in the UK complete one of those audits. This is the most comprehensive research ever done of its kind. We aggregated all the research together and very conservatively extrapolated it. And the Times newspaper reported the findings with this headline: "Loving thy neighbour is priceless, but it's worth £3 billion a year." 3 billion with a B. It's completely mind-blowing. As a result of that, we now have contracts, and I haven't got time to go into it and explain fully. We have contracts with 8 police forces who now fund us to help churches start these projects. Why? Because we've developed best practice and we've developed evidence that they work. And they'll fund us to help the church do what it should be doing in the community. Isn't it incredible? But this is faith that has integrity. This is faith in action. This is not a Sunday faith. This is not a religious faith. This is not a comfortable faith. It's a wild faith. It's a risky faith. It's an adventurous faith. It's a faith not safe in here, but wild out there. Wild out there. And so for me, I'm still on the journey. I'm still on the journey of working out what it means for me to deprivatize my faith. And the reason I believe that each of you have chosen as business people to be here today is because actually in your hearts you are on exactly the same journey. That you know that a privatized faith is impotent to change the marketplace. It's impotent to change community. It's impotent to change culture and society. But you're here because you're hungry for more of Jesus. You're here because you're hungry to work out what it means to be a person of faith in the marketplace. Not just to invite people to church and to put more in the offerings, but to bring about social, economic, political transformation in communities. I want to finish with a simple story. I went to a very nice conference. It was John, no offense here, it's his lovely conference. It was a very posh conference in a very posh hotel on a very posh street. I arrived as hundreds of other people did. I got my badge. I hate wearing badges, but I've not got mine on. And I got my conference pack. And as I looked at the conference pack, I thought, it's a long morning ahead. I'm going to go to the bathroom. So off I went. Ladies, you may not know this, but in the bathroom, and I don't know what happens in the ladies, I've never been in there, but in the gents, we don't talk to each other when we're doing our stuff. You know, it's not protocol. At least it's not in Britain. Is it protocol? No, okay. British protocol, South African protocol, gents don't speak to each other in the toilets, okay? The guy stood next to me doing his business, began a conversation. Well, actually, it was more like a monologue. He began explaining that how last night had been a big night out and how this was a very early start and he wished he'd stayed at home in bed. He explained that his head was pounding and all he wanted was an aspirin and some water. And here he was at this wretched conference. And then he said, besides that, I've looked at the program. I've never heard of any of the speakers. It doesn't look very exciting. I just wish I'd gone home. I just wish I could go home. I left the bathroom feeling more relieved in more ways than one. He'd finished his monologue. 30 minutes later, the conference host stood on the platform and he introduced the keynote speaker. As I stood up from the table at the back of the room and walked down the aisle to the podium and took the microphone, there was one gentleman whose head fell in his hands. Jean, I must say at the start of this conference, I did need to go and relieve myself, but I'm pleased to report that I had no such experience here. He was the first person to come and speak to me at the end of the session. And he said these words, Matt, I'm so sorry. I didn't know who you were. My friends, if it matters who a person is, we have an integrity problem. How we treat those people who we think can do nothing for us is the ultimate test of our integrity and authenticity. You could not have sat here today and not felt profoundly challenged by all that you've heard. Not from people who have complete integrity, but from people who are wrestling each day as a new day to make decisions based on integrity, to treat people with integrity, whoever they are, whether you're hiring or firing them, to treat them with integrity. If today you feel that your integrity has been, if Jesus has kind of poked you, challenged you, left you feeling a little bit uncomfortable, I would love to pray with you. Is that okay, Jean? I'd love to pray with you, and I want to respond. So, Patrick, can I ask you to come as a friend and a brother? Because I'd love you to pray for us